Good morning, or depending when you're listening to this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross and I was always told I had a voice for radio, so I've made a podcast all about the Pokemon trading card game. And you're listening to PTCGRadio. Now this week we have got a little bit of news to get to. There's a few things that have happened, but I'm going to be honest with you ladies and gentlemen, none of them are hugely exciting, but they are things we need to have a look at anyway, because we like to be complete on this podcast. I am then going to go over the results of the Houston Regional. Happened in Texas this past weekend, over in America, and just like we did last week, I'm going to be going through the results of that regional, but I'm going to be looking a little bit deeper. Looking at choices people made with their decks in both the standard format on day 1 and the expanded format in day 2, and now that we've got 3 regionals and we've had 89 of the 96 top 32 decks reported, I've started to have a look, draw some trends, and it's quite interesting some of the things we can see if we start comparing all of these. So we're going to be having a look at that. We're then going to finish, if we've got time today, having a look at the different ways to play Evil Tower, which, if you remember back to last week's podcast, I told you was a potentially game changer. It looked like, from the first weekend of regionals, there's ones over in Phoenix and Philadelphia, that maybe Evil Tower is actually making a comeback. Now, some of the World Championship decks have been announced. We have a product image. We don't actually know what one of the decks is. We can see 3 of them, we can't see the 4th. Now, the 3 that have been announced really aren't particularly exciting. Andrew Estrada's deck is being printed, as is Trent Orndorff and Haruto Kobayashi. They are the winners from the Masters, Seniors and Juniors. It will be interesting for me to find out, do any of you actually buy these championship decks? Because I personally don't. The one cool thing I will say is, just like they did last year, the pin badge that they released for Worlds 2014 is included within this deck, so I suppose that's kind of cool. Now, I said there isn't much good news. We have actually had a reveal of the Kyogre EX and the Groudon EX cards, which will be coming in the next set to be released in Japan. Now, we've seen product images for the Primal Kyogre, the Primal Groudon, I should say. We haven't seen Kyogre or Groudon EX. And I'm going to be honest with you, neither of them are particularly exciting. They are both weak to grass, somewhat strangely. They've got the same weakness to grass, and in the format we're in at the moment, with Virizion and Genesect being as good as it actually is, that's a problem. Having a weakness to one of the main decks is a problem. They've both got a retreat cost of 4, which is horrible. They've both got 180 HP, which doesn't help it. I mean, it's good. It's pretty much, well, it is the maximum for a non-Mega or Primal EX, but it's still going to be one-shot by a it's still going to be 2-shot by a Virizion using Emerald Slash, and 1-shot by a Genesect using Megalo Cannon. So it's not, shall we say, spectacular. Kyogre, they've both got the same pretty much attack cost as well. Kyogre's got an attack for a Water and Colourless, it does 30 damage and Sleep. Groudon's got an attack for a Fighting and a Colourless, it does 30 damage. And on a coin flip of heads, discards an energy attached to your opponent's active Pokemon. This is potentially pretty good, however, because if you remember, we've got a lot of fighting support at the moment. We've got Strong Energy, Fighting Stadium, Muscle Band, which can make this 30 into 90. Or even 110 with 2 energy. But the problem is we've got Lucario EX and we've got Landorus EX, both of whom can attack for a single Fighting Energy rather than a Fighting and a Colourless. And Fighting still doesn't have a good way to accelerate energy, not reliably, so you're going to be doing this on turn 2 at the earliest, which is fine of course if you go first, but not fine if you go second, because it means you're going to miss your turn 1 attack. Now, maybe Primal Groudon EX is going to be worth it, and if it is, we've already seen the Omega barrier, which looks very interesting, from a couple of weeks ago. I believe it stopped effects of trainers on Groudon, so maybe that's going to make it worth playing, but for the time being, it's not good enough. Now, the big attacks, Kyogre EX for 2 Water and 2 Colourless, does 140 damage, and returns 2 Water Energy to your hand. Now, if Blastoise was still a thing, this could be a good attack. Now, it is unfortunately only 140, which means Muscle Band will put it up to 160, which is basically almost enough to one-hit EXs, but not quite. I like the returning to energy to hand in a Blastoise deck, because it means if Kyogre then gets knocked out, you're not losing the energy goes back to your hand, and even if you're end, the energy is then back in your deck. But it does 140, Blastoise isn't really viable anymore, and for those two reasons, this attack is not particularly good. Groudon does a straight 130 for free fighting and a colourless. Both Lucario and Landorus have better attacks for free fighting energy. Lucario does 100 for free energy, but not 130 for 4. You don't want to be putting 4 energy on Groudon. It's gone. By the way, with all the fighting support, Lucario might only do a base of 100 for free energy. By the time you add Fighting Stadium, Muscle Band, and a couple of strong energy, that goes up to 180 for free and looks a heck of a lot better. We've also seen a couple of other Pokemon, Swampert, Blaziken, and Sceptile. So let's have a quick look at those. A Sceptile's got an ability. When you attach a grass energy from your hand to one of your Pokemon, you can heal 30 damage from that Pokemon. And that's pretty good. Now this of course doesn't work with Emerald Slash. Emerald Slash attaches from the deck, it does not attach from the hand. But in a Virizion Genesect deck, this could potentially be kind of cool. Or in any grass deck. It's not ideal, but it's not amazing. It also doesn't work with Herbal Energy, because Herbal Energy provides a grass energy only while this card is attached to a grass Pokemon. And if I'm wrong with this ruling, please somebody do correct me on Twitter, @TheWassy, or if listening on YouTube, just pop it down below. But generally, the way this works is, you are not attaching a grass energy from your hand, it is only a grass energy while it's attached to the Pokemon, not when you attach it. Otherwise, this would mean Herbal Energy would heal 50 from Sceptile, and it would still be rubbish because it's a stage 2 that does 70 damage for free energy and has a weakness to fire. But at least it would have an interesting ability. As it is, it's pretty garbage. Blaziken's got an interesting first attack, Flame Speed for 1 fire energy. Attach 2 fire energy cards from your discard pile to your Pokemon in any way that you like. It's a stage 2. You don't want to be attacking with a stage 2 to set up other Pokemon. It's just not happening. What is more interesting is its second attack, Heat Blow, fire and a colourless, 100 damage, discard an energy. This could mean you could potentially get Blaziken going and just do 100 every turn discarding an energy. It's going to be amazing against Virizion Genesect. It's going to get through Pyro. Time you put a Muscle Band on, it's got a one-hit KO. It's going to get through things like Sigilyph with Safeguard. This is far from an ideal attacker. It's not amazing, but it's potentially quite good. It's a stage 2, and at the moment stage 2 attackers are not in vogue. They're not particularly good. But this is more interesting than most. And finally we have Swampert. For a water and a double colourless, 60 damage to 1 Pokemon. That is garbage. And 120 for 4 energy is pretty garbage as well, especially on a stage 2. They're not particularly great Pokemon. They're interesting. Blaziken, if you really want to if you really want to pick a winner, then Blaziken is the best, but that's still not great. We are getting a Galady X box coming in January. You're getting a Galady X promo, a jumbo version of the promo, and 4 packs. Pity that, as previously discussed on the podcast, Galady X, it's not very good. Let's just say that. That's the polite way of saying it. There is a Mega Diancie box being released in January. It's going to come with Mega Diancie EX, a jumbo version of Mega Diancie EX, 5 booster packs, a playmat, and a Diancie pin. This is coming out in the US, UK, Europe, etc. Very similar to the Mega Diancie pack I told you about that's going to be in Japan soon. But the good news is that we're going to be getting a pin as well, so that's good. More on what those cards do in a minute. We have also going to be guessing, I've told you about these, the Battle Arena deck Xerneas versus Yveltal. It's just not particularly good. It's got Hollow Dark and Fairy Energy, which I suppose is kind of cool. It's got Trevor, which is the one that allows you to search for a Pokemon, put it into your hand. Good, but most decks need supporters to draw cards, so it's not it's really not going to be amazing. The other thing is that in the Xerneas deck, you're only getting 6 foil fairy energy and 10 regular fairy, so if you want to foil up your deck, you're probably going to want 2 of them. You do also get 2 foil Xerneas, which is kind of cool, and 1 foil Aromatisse. So you are getting a few foil cards in there, which I suppose is kind of cool. Also comes with a couple supporters, a couple Pokemon Center Lady, a fan club, a couple of Sycamore, a Professor's Letter and 2 Ultra Ball, which are playable. They're not amazing, but they're potentially decent. Look at the Evil Town deck, and we see the same kind of thing. 6 foil Darkness Energy, so you need 2 of these to really make out your deck properly. Couple of Ultra Ball, 1 Trevor, couple of Shauna, couple of Professor's Letter, couple of Sycamore, couple of Muscle Band, 1 Lysandra, so a better load of supporters and trainers. I know there's a Lysandra in the Xerneas deck as well, sorry I missed that one first time round. And a couple of Fairy Garden as well in the Xerneas deck. So like the Fairy deck we've already had released, this gives you Fairy Energy, Xerneas, Aromatisse, Fairy Garden, most of what you need to start making one of these Aromatisse decks. We also have a foil Zoroark in Evil Town, which isn't particularly good, and a couple of foil Evil Towns. They're not amazing, but these decks have some decent trainers. They might be worth a punt. They're not amazing, but like I say, they might be worth a punt. The last piece of news today centres around the Diancie EX and Mega Diancie EX, the ones that are coming in that box which I told you about before. And there is a chance that, like Crocodile EX and Garchomp EX, they are only going to be released. They've started doing this. It's something they never used to do in the last few years. All the promo level X's, EXs, Primes, etc. were reprints of ones from the sets. But recently with ones like Garchomp and Crocodile and potentially Metagross as well, they've started releasing these EXs, which are only available as promos in the sets. The question is, are they any good? Well, the Diancie EX is a fairy Pokemon with a weakness to metal. That's a good weakness to have, but it's got 140 HP, and as we've seen previously with cards like Shaymin and Victini and Jirachi, and to a lesser extent Ho-Oh EX, you don't want low HP on EXs. Now, this is the first 140 HP EX. Fits right between cards like Shaymin and Victini and Ho-Oh, but it's a problem. The good weakness helps, but 140 is not that difficult for most Pokemon to hit. Put it this way, all Lugia has to do is put a muscle band on and boom, free prizes. So are the attacks amazing? Well, for a double colourless, you can do 20 damage, and any damage done to this Pokemon by attacks next turn is reduced by 20. That's pretty garbage. And for 2 Fairy and a colourless, it does 80 damage, flip 2 coins, 40 more for each head. 160 for free energy is pretty good because the muscle band takes it up to 180, but that's only if you can hit a double heads. Now, the one thing this does have going for it is it's a fairy Pokemon, which means it fits very nicely into Aromatisse decks, moving energy around, healing, etc., and you're going to need 2 of the garbage HP. Now, Mega Diancie EX has 190 HP, which is the lowest we've seen for any Mega EX so far. But bearing in mind, all of the EXs I mentioned a minute ago, which have low HP, have not had Mega EXs released to go with them. Now again, there is no word on whether there will be a Spirit Link card included in this box for Diancie, but my guess here is my same as the guess for Metagross EX. I don't think Metagross EX is going to have a Spirit Link card because it's coming as a promo, and when they announce these sets, they tell us it's coming with coins. If we were going to get a Metagross Spirit Link or a Diancie Spirit Link in these sets, you would think they would announce that when they announced which coin was going to be in the set. When there's a pin, they announce there's going to be a pin. When there's a coin, they announce there's going to be a coin. I doubt they would include a Spirit Link card in the set and not tell us. So I think it's safe to assume the Spirit Link isn't coming in the set. Spirit Link, for those that have forgotten, are cards coming out for Manectric EX and Gengar EX in our Phantom Forces set, and they are Pokemon tool cards that you attach to Manectric or Gengar EX, and it doesn't end your turn when you Mega Evolve them. They're the only EXs getting them in that set, because they're the only ones from that set that Mega Evolve. Pokemon have shown no intention recently to retrospectively release Spirit Links for Mega EXs like Kangaskhan and Venusaur, which have already been released. And I don't see, if they're not going to retrospectively release Spirit Link cards for old Mega EXs, and if they're not going to release Spirit Links in this set, you know, the promo set where you get the Diancie, I cannot imagine for a second that they're going to give us a Spirit Link for this card. So let's assume there's no Spirit Link for this and it's got 190 HP, it's already looking bad. But it's got a good weakness and it can fit into Aromatisse deck, so we might be cooking with something. And we've already seen Kangaskhan and Mega Kangaskhan having some success in these Aromatisse decks, so it's already been proven that Mega EXs, the only way they've actually been successful so far is in fact as part of an Aromatisse deck. So if the attacks are good, it's set up to potentially be good. There's one attack and it's a doozy. Fairy colourless, 100 damage, whoop-de-frickin' do. During your opponent's next turn, your Pokemon, plural, take no damage from the attacks of your opponent's Pokemon EX, including this Pokemon. This effect ends if this Pokemon is no longer your active Pokemon. Which means if your opponent uses a gust effect like Lysandra, Red Signal, Pokemon Catcher, or indeed plays something like an Escape Rope, this stops being the effect. But if they don't, all of your Pokemon are immune from attacks by Pokemon EXs. Blanket immunity. It's like Sigilyph Safeguard, but it actually extends to all of your Pokemon. That, ladies and gentlemen, is absolutely ridiculous. It's crazy. It is phenomenal, I think is fair to say. So, quite frankly, I mean, just wow, that's a fantastic attack. It only does 100 damage, but what that means is, say you're against a Landorus. Now, one thing Landorus can do against Sigilyph is sit there with one energy attached and just do 30 damage to one of your other benched Pokemon. It's not ideal, but it gives them something to do while they're blocked by Sigilyph. But now this Diancie will block everything. Now, a lot of Pokemon are actually using, a lot of decks are now using non-EXs to get around things like Sigilyph and also to get around Pyroar. But a lot of those decks are doing it with Garbodor. This is an effect of an attack. Garbodor cuts off abilities. So if I'm playing against something like an Yveltal Garbodor deck, I do 100 with Diancie, and that Yveltal can never hit me again. And the only attacker they've got is Garbodor, and they're not probably running the energy for Garbodor. It means every turn they can play a Lysandra, they can attack, or an Escape Rope. But if they cannot play a Lysandra or an Escape Rope, they can never hit me again. Now, the attack only does 100, it's on a Mega EX, you've basically got to play it in Aromatisse. It's got 190 HP, and it can be got around by cards like Lysandra that everybody's already playing. It's far from a perfect card, but it's interesting enough to make me a little bit excited. It's a kind of card, in fact it reminds me very much of Mega Kangaskhan, because it's the kind of card where everybody's just thinking, ooh, that's pretty good, but I don't know how to use it. And sooner or later, somebody is going to turn around and figure out how to use it, probably in an Aromatisse deck, and all of a sudden we're going to have a very interesting deck that we didn't have before. And that is unequivocally a good thing. So moving on to Houston Regionals now. We've gone through and we've basically seen the total. So I'm just going to lead you through the totals of top 32. This isn't, I believe, every deck, but it is the vast majority of them, and that's going to have to do. I believe this is 30 of the 32 decks I'm going to be telling you about. The good news about Houston Regionals, and I'm thanking the topcut.net for this particular information, who I believe got it from Isaiah Middleton, so thank you to all the people involved for getting this information together. Although I tallied it up, so props to me for the tallying. They got the information, but I tallied it up. And the winner, in terms of most top cuts in top 32, remember top 32 was decided out of the 9 rounds for day 1, and these were played in the standard format, boundaries crossed to Furious Fists. There were 9 Virizion Genesect decks in the top 32, which is interesting because over both the regionals last week, we saw a total of 16 Virizion Genesect, far below the 37 Yveltal decks. But Virizion Genesect got 9 in one regional, putting it more popular than it was last week. In second place with 7 spots in top 32, Evil Tal. Evil Tal took 7 spots of the top 32. Far down from the 37. It was taking half the top cut in in both the regionals last week, and now this week we've got 7. That's not very many comparatively. Just behind it in third place, very interestingly, Donphan with 6 in top 32. But one thing which really stuck out at me here, of the top 32, Donphan was in first place, second place, fourth place and fifth place. It might have taken 6 of the top 32, but it took 4 of the top 5 places after Swiss rounds. Which means 4 of the top 5 seeds after 9 rounds in top 32 were Donphan. Now, they're listed as Donphan, but one thing I want to remind you about from regionals last week, and this is why I think going through the regionals results is good on this podcast, because I go in this in far more detail than other people tend to, and I'm comfortable saying that because I read pretty much every Pokemon website out there. And I also tend to draw conclusions that a lot of other people don't always look for, shall we say. Because last week it was generally Donphan Sigilyph, not Donphan Trevenant, at least the way it was reported. Now, maybe it's Donphan Trevenant, maybe it's Donphan Sigilyph, maybe it's a mixture of all of them. Remember, we've got Latias, which cuts off Pokemon with abilities, like, for instance, Pyroar. Maybe it's Donphan Sigilyph, which so you attack with Donphan and switch to Sigilyph, which stops EX's attacking. Or maybe it's Donphan Trevenant, which goes into Trainer Lock. Maybe it's a mix of all of them. Now, for those of you that know me, and I must have mentioned this on the podcast approximately 20 billion times by now, I love Donphan. He is one of my very favourite Pokemon. You should know that I love Donphan because the logo for PTCGRadio, and if you're listening on YouTube, take a quick look at the video. The video is just a static image of the logo with the title of this particular podcast on. It's Donphan and Mamoswine. I love Donphan and Mamoswine. Now, at the moment I feel a bit stupid. Donphan, it has been proven in these regionals, Donphan is viable. That's a fact at this stage. Now, whether it's viable in Extended is an interesting question. Because at the moment, the answer seems to be, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Certainly out of the 2 regionals last week, we only had 1 Donphan making top 8. Which is, it's not what we've got so far. So, that's what we've got. 1 Donphan making top 8 in total out of the 3 regionals. So, it's far from ideal. It is, it doesn't seem to be making waves in day 2. But on day 1, Donphan seems to be relevant. And it's basically got 1 attack that does 40 damage, switches to a bench Pokemon. But of course, Muscle Band, Fighting Stadium, Strong Energy, actually, and this for 1 energy, you get those 3 cards on there, boom, 100 damage, 1 energy. That, ladies and gentlemen, is fantastic. And then you switch out to a Sigilyph so your opponent can't attack. And yeah, they can use Lysandre and all of that. Well, yes, of course they can, but it's far from ideal. They can't always do that. Donphan is a deck I will be testing, and the good news for you lovely people means there will be a testing deck breakdown coming on my YouTube channel soon, and that will be showing you the Donphan list which I'm currently working with. Now, speaking of my YouTube channel, it can be found on YouTube at youtube.com/user/PTCGRadio, or just search PTCGRadio on YouTube. You're intelligent people, you can find a YouTube channel, I am assuming. If you can't, maybe I'm not supposed to find it, but I have faith that you all can. I have done a winning deck breakdown. There was one of the top seeds going undefeated in top 32 was a chap called Ahmed who went 5-0-4 with his Evil Tal deck, although it must have an asterisk next to it because 2 of those were intentional draws, so it effectively went 5-0-2 in the first 7 rounds. But I did a winning deck breakdown of that particular Evil Tal variant. I uploaded it yesterday, which as I'm recording was Tuesday the 14th of October, so make sure you track that down, have a look on YouTube, and if you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel yet, what are you doing, you silly people? It's like the podcast, but there's pictures, and I play games, and there's live games, and deck breakdowns, and games I play on PTCG PTCGO. I would heartily recommend that you people go and search out those videos. Go and have a look at them. It's amazing. Coming up on 600 subscribers. If you're not one of them, that's very sad. And if you are one of them, find me a friend. Go find a friend to subscribe. So we had 9 Virizion Genesect, 7 Evil Tau variants. I'm lumping them all in together because if I try and go through the individual Evil Tau variants, we can't draw patterns. Essentially, in order to draw patterns, I have to cut some corners. The only other 2 really viable decks, we had 4 Pyroar variants, but all 4 Pyroar variants were played with Seismitoad. And one of the only other decks that cut, there was a single Seismitoad Mewtwo Garbodor, which is another deck that I have had a look at on my YouTube channel, played a few games with, done a testing deck breakdown for. When I say testing deck breakdown, I mean this is a list I'm testing with. It's a work in progress, but it will show you how the deck's going. Go check it out. Seismitoad doesn't seem to be working without Pyroar, and Pyroar doesn't seem to be working without Seismitoad. Or to put it another way, they are not being played exclusively of each other. They are only being played as a pair. But Pyroar Seismitoad seems to be a good deck. Now, I was looking to do a winning deck breakdown for a list that somebody used to good effect, but the only decks that I have seen posted on Facebook are extended format Pyroar Seismitoad, which we used in the second day, and include cards like Tropical Beach, and I suppose the way I look at expanded format is we're looking to make top 32. Anything above that is a bonus. There also, I don't believe, is a you can only go unlimited or standard on Pokemon on PTCGO at the moment, which is what a lot of people use for testing and I use for YouTube videos. There's no expanded format option. Speaking of which, Pokemon, get an expanded format option going, would you? Because if I go unlimited, everyone can be using Heart Gold, Soul Silver cards onwards, and that's not going to give me good testing. So if you could do an expanded version, if anyone from Pokemon's listening, I can't imagine they are, but if they are, give us an expanded format on PTCGO, please. So I don't have a deck breakdown for you for that, but if I find one, I shall. That's another deck I think I need to be testing, especially in expanded. And the only other deck, there were 3 fighting decks. So what can we see from week 2, looking at those as a whole? Fighting is just not as good as everyone was saying. Fighting had 3 top cuts out of 32. When I say fighting, I am of course referring to Lucario Landorus decks. It's not really going very well for them. They're not doing particularly well. They're doing alright, but they're not going great. Pyroar is having an impact, but it's not doing amazingly. It's doing alright. One thing I will say about Pyroar Seismitoad, it's going to lose the mirror to regular Seismitoad 99 times out of 100. We've got Donphan is viable, as I've talked about. And then we've got this weird thing going on at the top between Virizion Genesect and Evil Tau. Now, I have long been a subscriber to the opinion that Virizion Genesect beats Evil Tau decks. But judging by my performance at UK Nationals this past year playing Virizion Genesect, having all 3 of my losses to Evil Tau variants under ridiculous circumstances, i.e. one guy that had to hit something like 4 heads out of 4 to win and did, or the guy that drew Godly on turn 1 to win and then got a turn 1 Night Spear going second in game 2. But regardless, I lost to 3 Evil Tau variants, so maybe I'm just sucky at playing Evil Tau. Maybe they had good luck. Who knows? The fact remains, ladies and gentlemen, that they are the 2 decks that are winning. Evil Tau, and this is something we need to worry about, something we need to watch. Evil Tau variants absolutely dominated both regionals on the first weekend. And that always leads to an inevitable backlash where people making the decks for week 2 try and beat Evil Tau. So there was a bunch of Evil Tau Raichu this week trying to win the mirror match, and they will be cannibalizing themselves a little bit. But also, Virizion Genesect came up big, and I believe that it beats it because it's immune to laser unless they're playing Garbodor, and it's got G-Booster, and Evil Tau's slower than it used to be, etc, etc. Certainly without Dark Patch and all that, I think Virizion Genesect definitely, at least on day 1, when you're playing in the standard format, has the one-upmanship. It's going to win that game, usually, if everybody draws evenly, and Virizion Genesect's everywhere. Pyroar's also got a pretty good matchup against it because a lot of people have taken to playing things like Evil Tau, Seismitoad, Mewtwo, without playing Garbodor, or they're just playing Garbodor, or they're just playing Raichu. And I've explained this on the podcast before, but essentially the reason why the big basics Garbodor did so well at the end of last season against Pyro, and you can see this in the US Nationals final where Brandon Salazar beat Michael Pramawat, playing big basics against Pyro, was that he was playing Garbodor and Raichu. If Pyro takes down the Raichu, you use Garbodor and kill Pyro with your EXs, because Pyro's ability gets shut off, and if the Pyro takes down your Garbodor, you just kill the Pyro with Raichu. But generally, with Yveltal, you only play Garbodor or you play Raichu, which means a Pyro player can basically just gust up whichever one it is and kill them, and then it's going to win. The reason why Seismitoad has a better time against it is because you've got a quicker attack, you can be using that attack on turn 1, and Litleo and Pyro are weak to water, so you've got the speed advantage. If Seismitoad doesn't have a good start, then the Seismitoad Garbodor matchup goes the same way, where Pyro has an opportunity to gust up and kill the Garbodors, and then it's going to have the auto win. So that's one potential explanation, and also Donphan. If Donphan switches to a Sigalith, then most of the time Yveltal decks are going to be using regular Yveltal for 50, or they're going to have to try and get a Raichu out. I'm not going to go too much into that matchup, because the next video I post on my YouTube channel is going to be the first game I played with this Yveltal deck list I've just done a winning deck breakdown for, and it is in fact a game which I play against a Donphan list with this Yveltal list, and you'll see that it was I'm not going to tell you the result, that would be boring. Spoilers are a bad thing, but what I will tell you is it was a fairly close game. So go and have a look at that and you'll see the matchup in a little bit more detail. The other thing I will say is that the Donphan player did not have a perfect list in my opinion here, so the game would have been, shall we say, even closer if he might have been playing a better list. So that's what we've got. 9 Virgin, 7 Yveltal, 6 Donphan, 4 Pyro, all with Seismitoad, 3 Fighting and 1 Seismitoad on its own. Moving into the top 8, in top 8, not moving on to top 4, we had Alex Fields with Plasma, and he, and this is something else that other people aren't doing, looking at where they came from, he finished day 1 in 18th place with Pyro Seismitoad, and then he switched to Plasma. In 7th, we had Henry Ross Clunis, who finished 28th after day 1 with Virizion Genesect, and carried on with Virizion Genesect in day 2. In 6th place, we had Zachary Kreckler with Plasma on day 1, and he kept with Plasma day 2, but presumably played a different list, bringing Prism Energy, etc. back in. And on the other person who made top 8 but not top 4 was Philip Barter, who played Pyro Seismitoad to the 19th seed. Zach was a 17th seed, to the 19th seed in day 1, and then switched to regular Pyro for day 2. So interestingly, a lot of them staying with the same deck, but changing around a little bit. Moving into top 4, we had Jimmy Pendarvis, who was the 29th seed at the end of day 1 with Virizion Genesect, and he kept with that in day 2. The other person in top 4 was Mike Canavenes, sorry for the pronunciation there, who was the first seed after day 1 with Donphan, but then ended up in 3rd place with Virizion Genesect. In 2nd place, we had Brandon Cantu, who was 10th seed at the end of day 1 with Plasma, and played Plasma Kyurem on day 2, finishing 2nd place. And the winner was Sam Chen, who got 16th seed on day 1 with Yveltal Seismitoad Garbodor, and switched to Virizion Genesect Drifblim on day 2. Which makes perfect sense. Virizion Genesect is a very good deck, and you put Drifblim in there to make your Plasma matchup easier, and we saw there were 4 Plasma decks in the top 8. Now, whether Sam clearly made a good prediction here, playing Virizion Genesect with Drifblim when half of the top 8 cut, remember it goes from everyone to top 32 to a top 8 cut, when half of the top 8 is playing Plasma and you're playing Drifblim, that gives you a very nice path to the win. And he definitely played Plasma in the final, he probably played it in at least top 8 or top 4 as well. So again, we see this trend of most people switching up their deck, but actually it was about half and half here. People switching up their deck for day 2. But then again, we saw, 2 people who just played Virizion Genesect both days and did fine. We saw a couple people who played Plasma both days and ended up just fine. And the final tally for top 8 there was 4 Virizion Genesect, 3 Plasma, and a single Pyral. So what does that tell us about the regionals as a whole? Now, we've had 3, so we're going to do some tallies here. We've got 7 unreported decks, but we're going to work with that. The thing to remember here is that the totals were affected on the second week because they had the results from week 1. So, in Philadelphia, we had 3 Donphan, 3 Virizion Genesect, 17 Yveltal, 5 Fighting, 1 Seismitoad, and 1 unreported, leading to a top 8 of 5 Yveltal, 3 Virizion, and 1 Donphan. In Phoenix, we had 4 Virizion Genesect, 13 Yveltal, 2 Pyro, and a Seismitoad, with 6 decks still unreported, going to a top 8 of 4 Yveltal, 2 Pyro, 1 Seismitoad, and 1 Virizion Genesect. And that leads us to the following totals, going through 3 weeks, with 7 unreported decks. 37 Yveltal variants, bearing in mind the number of these was significantly lower in week 2. 16 Virizion Genesect variants, 9 Donphan variants, 8 Fighting variants, 6 Pyral variants, and 3 Seismitoad without Pyral. Pretty much all the Pyral being played with Seismitoad, but I consider Pyral Seismitoad being a very different deck to Seismitoad, but is still a fairly similar deck to regular Pyral, so that's where I'm going with those counts. Feel free to disagree with me. So what we basically see here is Virizion Genesect and Yveltal, clearly the top 2 decks in the format. That should be beyond reproach. Now, when I say top decks in the format, I am going by the numbers, and people who have listened to the podcast for a while know that when these results come out, I like to take a really good long look. We've been about 15-20 minutes looking at these results now. I like to take a good long look, looking at all the trends we can look at, and looking at why these trends may have occurred. And the reason I do this is to help you guys metagame. Help you guys decide what to play for future tournaments. I hope it's interesting information that you find useful. If it is, make sure you tweet me at @thewassie or email me at ptcgradio@hotmail.co.uk, or if you're listening on YouTube, SoundCloud, WordPress, etc., just leave a little comment and I will get to it, hopefully before too long. And so we see here Yveltal and Virizion Genesect by far the 2 top decks. Now, we could say that Yveltal is by far more popular than Virizion, having double the amount of top cuts, but Virizion Genesect won in the second week compared to Yveltal. It had more top cuts, so that's nothing. I would be careful about just saying, ooh, straight away Yveltal's the best deck because it's got so many top cuts, because it really won week 1 and then it came back to the pack in week 2 a little bit, which shows not utter dominance but just really good in one week, countered the next. We then have kind of a tier 2, and by the way, anyone who wants to use tier 1.5, it's a ridiculous notion. You guys don't count 1, 1.5, 2, 3, 4, so let's go tier 1, tier 2. Tier 1, clearly above, out on their own, Virizion Genesect and Yveltal. Tier 2, I'm going to define as decks which are viable, and this basically involves Pyral, probably with Seismitoad, Fighting decks and Donphan, and to a lesser extent Seismitoad Garbodor. Anything else I consider to be a fringe deck at this stage. Now, this is based purely on the numbers. More tournaments are going to happen in the future, and when these other tournaments happen, we're going to have a bunch more results, and then maybe we can start looking at some other totals. But until we get to those totals, I think we need to basically stay where we are for now. For the moment, we need to basically sit here and just look at what we've got. And that's very important. Don't get too kind of caught up in anything. Don't go crazy with any of these totals. Just have a quick look at what we've got, and we'll get there when we get there. But that's the deal for the moment. So let's have a quick look at the totals for the top 8 decks so far. And at the top, and again, this is to be taken with a pinch of salt because we've only had 3 tournaments and there was very much a reaction after week 1. But in first place we have Evil Tower with 9, closely followed by Vrizzy and Genesect with 7. But remember that all of Evil Towers came in the regionals week 1 in Philadelphia and Phoenix, and there were no Evil Tower variants in the top 8 of the Houston regionals in week 2. Vrizzy and Genesect also happened to be a deck where it was much better in the second week. We also have 3 Plasma variants, but this is to be taken with a pinch of salt, because all 3 of the Plasma variants came around in Houston Regionals. That shows they were a good call for that tournament, not necessarily that they were good. And we round it out with 3 Pyro, 1 Seismitoad, and 1 Donphan. And you might notice that they are the same decks as previously. Now what I haven't done is tallied up the totals for Plasma decks, because there were only 1 or 2 here or there. Having said that, I did total up 3 Seismitoad decks out of 96, so maybe I should have totaled Plasma as well. But Plasma I see as a fringe deck, until you get to Expanded. And that's the only thing we can really learn from Expanded. Evil Tal's still amazing, Vrizzy and Genesect still amazing, Pyral's still viable, Seismitoad still just on the edge of viability, and Donphan's not as good as it is in Standard. But Plasma comes out. In Expanded format, Plasma becomes much more viable than it was before. And that is why Sam Chen had so much success with his Virizion and Genesect deck, putting Drifblim in there. And that's what I can tell you about the regionals, and I think I've gone in that in quite a lot of detail. I've told you what the results were, I've tallied up the totals, I've told you if people changed between day 1 and day 2 and had success, I've told you about the trends that have been happening, why the trends have been happening, and I've concluded with the decks that you should be playing. I think I've been pretty gosh darn thorough about this, but as always, if I haven't been thorough enough, or you think I've missed something, or even if you just want to say hello, you can tweet me at TheWassy, you can email me at ptcgradio@hotmail.co.uk, or if you're listening on YouTube, or SoundCloud, or WordPress, or anything along those lines, just leave a little comment down below. Make sure you go and check out my channel on YouTube, subscribe, watch some videos, like them, comment, all that good stuff. Essentially, the more appreciated you lovely people make me feel, the more I'm going to be recording podcasts when I've got a sore throat and bothering to make videos when I'm a little bit tired. I'm going to put more effort in if you guys make me feel loved. Does that make me sound a little bit like an attention-grabbing bad person? Maybe it does. But gosh darn it, I just don't really care. As always, thank you very much for listening. Look after yourselves until next week. My name's Ross, and you've been listening to PTCG Radio. P.S. We're 42.5 minutes in, and I have a mouth ulcer, which is causing me some discomfort. You didn't need to know that, but aren't you glad I told you? We'll get to Evil Town next week. Don't worry, ladies and gentlemen, you will get your Evil Town discussion. You're going to have to wait another week. I believe in you. You can do this. Goodbye.